post, in the words of Stanley Phillips, is that means of communication by which messages of joy or otherwise are passed from one end of the world to the other, utilizing in the process every known means of transport, often in circumstances of adventurous difficulty. From its ancient and humble beginning, the postal system has today developed into one of the most effective instruments of modern civilization. It is classified as a home where postage stamps are bought and letters pass through. The place of postal service in the communication system cannot be underestimated.
The post office is just an office where members of the public go to transact all their postal transactions, buying of stamps, posting letters, buying of postal orders, registering their letters, sending money orders to their postal order money orders to their loved ones, sending parcels.
In the ancient world, postal service resulted from the discovery of writing that marked the beginning and development of trade, which in turn led to the growth of cities and empires. It is on record that messenger services were first inspired by the rising administrative needs of the ancient empires. It developed in Egypt and Persian empires between the 1580s BC and 550 BC, and later in the Old Assyrian Empire at about 671 BC. By the late 13th century, commerce, town life and education had started to re-emerge in Europe. In Nigeria, postal services were first introduced in the year 1852. The nation's first ever contact with the then colonial British government was in Lagos, Nigeria. That move innovated the spirit of the delivery of mails and other related services, which led to a signed agreement between Her Majesty's government and MacGregor Laird of the Company of African Merchants for the conveyance of Her Majesty mails from the United Kingdom to the west coast of Africa.
The agreement was January 29th, 1852, between MacGregor Laird. I have it quoted here in my master's dissertation. The terms of the agreement and the benefits and the liability of the company, all I have cited here. They are not impression or hearsay, they are archival, documented in archival material, and I've cited the source here. Even though there were talks to introduce this service in 1851, no concrete agreement was reached until 1852. In the agreement, which was signed on 29th January 1852, MacGregor Laird undertook to convey at a speed of not less than 8 knots an hour Her Majesty's mails from England to Fanadopo in West Africa. Vessels to convey these mails were to call at Lagos, Badagry, Bonny, Calabar and Cameroon on both the outward and homeward voyages, and the company was to convey, deliver and receive at each of the ports mentioned in this agreement all such of Her Majesty's mails as shall or were to be delivered thereat.
Since the inception of postal service in Nigeria in 1852, mail service remained its major preoccupation. In 1867, however, money order was introduced to facilitate financial transactions in Lagos as a substitute for the non-availability of a bank. For the period of 2 decades, between 1852 and 1872, postal services remained very modest in terms of area coverage, as attested to by Akinyeye.
The money order business was introduced, I think, in 1867, followed by the postal order business in 1868. I've quoted the volume of business and the factors determining the expansion and contraction of postal business at this time. Mails were exchanged between here, Abeokuta, and then the Gold Coast.
The post, without its postage stamp, to many is like soup without salt. The hand-stamped stamps with the inscription "Paid in Lagos" were just introduced to the Nigerian postal system in 1859. However, it was not until April 1892 when the British definite stamps with the inscription British Protectorate Oil River were first supplied. Those stamps were in 5 denominations and were publicly acclaimed for being rich in philatelic value.
I think that's the beauty of stamps, because they also become documentation symbols. They become symbol of unity for a country. They become historical symbols. And if you look at some of these, you will find when the Queen was still the head of Nigerian government or the Nigerian people, and you'll find her there. And that's how we knew the Queen. Most of us had not been to England until late 60s or 70s. So we didn't meet the Queen unless through the coins or through the stamp. And you had a feeling of, okay, I have a link with this woman. At least she knows I exist because I use her stamp to send. And by the time we now started having leaders, that's when the 3 major leaders started having their own stamps. Chief Awolowo, Nnamdi Azikiwe was then the president, and Tafawa Balewa.
To ensure that the memory of Festac is sustained and the memory of CBAC is equally put alive. And the thinking was that if we have a memorabilia in form of a postage stamp, which had been used historically for such purposes, it will be in the interest not just of CBAC and Festac, but the interest of Black and African people all over the world. And so we approached nipost to explore the possibility.
In its drive at attaining high standard in area of quality service, nipost had to suspend the use of franking machine early 1996 due to large-scale abuse by vendors and its misuse for sending scam letters to dupe members of the public, thereby tarnishing the reputation of the post. The loss of credibility of mails emanating from Nigeria necessitated the restriction of the use of franking machine to only domestic mails and its replacement by the computer-operated one for international mails. The expedited mail service, Speed Post, was introduced in 1986 as a courier arm of the Nigerian Post Service for time-sensitive mails item at the international level.
The UPU, which is the umbrella authority for postal affairs in the world, thought it fit to establish a courier outfit that is a kind of a courier product, let me put it, express product, which they named EMS, Expedited Mail Services. In fact, in 1984 Congress, that was where it was agreed that in order to stem and at the same time to give some value to some of the postal products, it was decided at that Congress that EMS should be established by all the countries that are members of the UPU. Of course, Nigeria being a signatory and a member, came back 2 years, that was 1996, established its own EMS.
The Nigerian Postal Service introduced into its mainstream of product diversification the electronic mail or email service as an electronic and computer-oriented information transmission device. The pilot scheme of the project started at 8 centers in Abuja, Lagos, Kano, Jos, Kaduna, Onitsha, Warri, and Port Harcourt. It later extended to additional 10 centers by the end of 1995. Since the establishment of nipost and government trust towards its commercialization, the development of its infrastructure to enhance its mail handling became pivotal for management to address. A total of 153 vehicles that were earlier ungrounded were rehabilitated, while a total of 22 motor vehicles, 220 motorcycles and 150 bicycles were procured less than a decade of its establishment. Mail processing was similarly enhanced by the repairs of the stamp cancelling machine and mail conveyor belt in some head offices in the country. One of the mandates given by the federal government to the Nigerian Postal Service was to ensure a vibrant revenue generation drive and prudent financial management. Finance being a major barometer for measuring the performance of an organization, nipost embarked on an aggressive drive to meeting this great mandate of government.
Even though the First Bank prides itself as being the first bank here, the Postal Service was actually the first bank in Nigeria. It was the first institution providing financial transactions from 1867 to 1868. The post office, the money order and the postal order businesses were the first real financial institution in Nigeria, facilitating exchange of cash among Nigerians. And later on there was the Post Office Savings Bank. All this came. We can say without fear of contradiction that the Post Office was the first bank.
In the past, we didn't know anything than to go to the post office. For most things, there were no banks, so we go to the post office to save money. There were no banks, so you cannot send money from here to another place. So you go to the post office to send money order, and so it was part of us.
In 1994, nipost recorded a total revenue of over 459 million naira, 572 million naira in 1995. By 1996, the total revenue of nipost had risen to over 900 million naira, representing 65% of the estimated budget for the year.
The late was created almost in 2000, and today we can talk about revenue of between 400 to 500 million a year, which we could go beyond that if there is proper planning.
One of the measures taken by the federal government to combat problems facing the public servants in Nigeria was the introduction of pension schemes. As a follow-up to the federal government's policy decision to review the management of pension schemes of parastatals funded by it, the Nigerian Postal Service, on the 16th of April 1997, inaugurated a 10-member board of trustees for pension matters to alleviate the sufferings usually encountered by retirees. As a commercial enterprise, which is translating from previous labor-intensive to one that is capital-intensive nature, the process of rationalization is usually mandatory. The Nigerian Postal Service had to disengage a substantial number of staff from its previous 24,000 staff strength. The post, according to Voltaire, is the links connecting all affairs, all negotiations. By its means, absent becomes present. The post in Nigeria first aligned with the international body when in 1879 the colonial arms of the post in Lagos joined the World Postal Union, re-entered in 1929 and finally in 1961 became the 86th member nation of the Universal Postal Union.
Basically, from the international viewpoint, Nigeria joined the first, well, I would call it, it's not Nigeria now, we will call it some of the colonies and territories of Nigeria became member of the UPU through Britain, because we were then a colony and under the control of the British Empire. Joined the UPU as far back as 1867 or thereabout. The development as at the time we came in is that the Universal Postal Union, which was the then new name, because they were previously Italian postal organizations, was responsible for setting standards and the most and means of settling accounts between administration when maize are exchanged between the two administrations. And they were solely as at the time concerned with those objectives.
There's no Congress to go beyond.
In the United Kingdom, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, Nigeria's Customs, and the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency have continued to yield positive results. Today, it will be right to say that mail pilfering and dumping belong to the past of nipost history. Alhaji Mahmoud Yayale Ahmed, Secretary to the Government of the Federation from 2007 to 2011, who represented the late President Umar Musa Yar'Adua, had described the national addressing as an initiative that has the capacity to fast-track the federal government's transformation agenda and put Nigeria in tandem with what is obtained in other developed parts of the world. Consequently, a National Steering Committee on Addressing was constituted on the 4th of May 2009 by the Minister with the objective of formulating a policy framework on addressing as a critical infrastructure that will be used for national planning and development, and also to design a uniform street naming, house numbering, and address database for Nigeria, which will be used for planning and other multi-sectoral purposes. A draft policy document on addressing standard was therefore submitted to the present Minister of Communication Technology on the 7th of May 2010. Management also embarked on rehabilitation of post offices through internally generated revenue as a means of restoring public confidence in the services rendered by these offices. For those requiring huge capital for their remodeling, nipost partnered with